love that's meant
What's up, y'all? This is Reese.
And this is Kafa.
How are y'all tonight?
Hope y'all doing all right.
I hope y'all doing swell, as my daughter would say. Yo, it has been a good turnout with y'all listening to our first couple shows, and we really appreciate y'all.
That's right.
We just want y'all to know we love y'all.
Love you.
And we just ask that you continue to be fit.
That's right, fit.
Following us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So, tonight is a little interesting. You know, we started this podcast to talk about church growth and development and just some other little church things that kind of happens to make church seem, more interesting, I guess. But in this episode today, we're going to talk a little bit about millennials and them, how they view church and things like that.
Okay.
One of the first things I do want to, I know we talked about it before,
right?
About just some of these, first of all, the categories that people are in age-wise. I did not know it's so many different ones. And now I understand why people keep trying to put me in the millennial stage, and I'm not. No matter which one I'm looking at, I'm not. For me being 43 and for you being whatever, we are not in the millennial. We are in Generation X.
Yes.
But I understand that people still get this age thing.
I don't think many people are aware of all the breakdowns of, and what you're speaking about, Maurice, is scientists and researchers have looked at people according to when they were born.
Right.
And they classify them and categorize them for certain behaviors that they have, ways that they act and interact with one another and with others. So within these groups, you have the millennials, you have Generation X, you have Generation Y, now there's Generation Z. Before that, you had baby boomers, and then you had the, other eras before then, and each of those have a personality,
right,
if you will. So it's almost like a horoscope, but it's not a horoscope because, but it tells us, hey, if you're born within this time frame, then you act and interact a certain way. Right. So, Marie, since you're looking some of this information up,
right,
maybe you can tell us a little bit more about some of these groups,
right,
if you will. Yeah.
So as I'm looking, and some of these groups, like the first four, have not changed. Mm-hmm. So the first one is the greatest generation. Mm-hmm. When they're born between 1901 and 1926. So that makes them 93 plus.
Right.
The silent generation, which is 1927 through 1945. Mm-hmm. That makes them anywhere between 74 and 92. The baby boomers, which is our parents, are 1946 to 1964.
Right.
Where they will be 55 to 73, right? Excuse me. So Generation X is where we fit in. They have us at born between 65 and 80, 1965 to 1980.
Right.
So Generation X and the baby boomers, that number keeps sliding depending on who you talk to, right?
Correct.
Now, here is where it gets interesting because for me, I knew Generation Y to be that 77, 78, up to 2000 or something like that. Mm-hmm. But it looked like they kind of changed it a little bit because now they're calling them Zennials, where they have the Generation X cynicism, but the millennial optimism. Mm-hmm. And they're born from 77 to 83.
And I think some of the, again, as the scientists and the researchers have looked at these people, they thought that they behaved one way.
Right.
And now that they all are now becoming of age and becoming adults, they're acting a little bit differently than what I guess they thought they were going to act as. So I think that's probably why some of these names have changed,
right,
and some of the ages and the years that they're born has changed, because now that they're looking at this group a little closer, they're able to see a little bit more how they interact with one another and with society as a whole.
All right. So with that comes I said Zennials. So next is the Generation Y, or the Millennials, which is 81 to 2000.
Right.
Then now they have this one called Centennials.
Mm-hmm.
It says right here, newer term, 95 to 2008. I'm sorry, 1995 to 2008. And then this is where it starts to get crazy because everybody's overlapping. Now is the Generation Z, post-millennials, or iGen also, and they're from 2001 to 2019.
Again, I think they overlap because it depends on what your personality is. So even though you were, somebody who was born in 2000 may act more like a centennial, I don't remember the names of them, or someone else born in the year 2000 may act a different way.
Right.
So, you can look at this as our daughter who was born 2001.
Right.
Does she act like all of her friends who were also born in 2001? She has a very old soul.
Right, she does.
And she is different in a lot of different ways, from her counterparts. So I think that's what they're realizing, that it's because there's so many of them that they're looking at them a little bit differently as they grow.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when they came upon some of these names, that era from the Great Depression, they were already adults. They had already lived through it. So it was nothing that they had to watch them go from, hey, this is how you acted as a child, and hey, this is how you act as an adult, and now this is how you're acting as an older adult. I think because they looked at these people as adults, it's different. So, the way you act as a child is going to be a little bit different than the way that you act when you're a young adult.
Right.
And it's clearly different than the way you act when you're 50, 60, 70 years old.
Right.
There's some things within your personality that will stay the same, but I am clearly not as free-spirited as I was when I was 16, 17, 18 years old.
Right.
So I can't say, oh yeah, I fit within this criteria, and you can classify me as this, because there's again, it's quite similar to a horoscope where it says, well, if you're born in this time frame, you act this way. And I just know this because I've gone through a lot of trainings,
right,
dealing with this with previous employers that I've had, because we had to. I worked at a senior center, and with seniors in a office of aging. So we were always looking at our range of individuals. We served those who were 50 and up. So someone could join or participate in the center, or participate in center type activities at the age of 50. And what they were looking for was clearly different than someone who was 90.
Mm-hmm.
And they both can go to the same place and they could participate in the same activity, but it was clearly for a different purpose. So we looked at that in a lot of different trainings, and what the scientists and the researchers have found, that those who are baby boomers are not willing to join anything.
Mm-hmm.
They want to come in, check in. Yeah, I'm taking this class here, and I'm painting, and they'll show you all the stuff they've done, but they don't walk out of there saying, "Oh, I'm a part of this."
Right. Right.
It doesn't define them. They're not interested in it. They love to volunteer. They love to give back their knowledge, because they all went to a lot of them went to college.
Right.
A lot of them have a lot of knowledge, and they're willing to share that, but they're not going there to learn more things or anything like that in that reference, because they've learned a lot. So they're there to give back what they've learned.
Right.
They may pick up a different hobby, but they don't really look at it as if, oh, I'm learning Zumba.
Right.
Right. No, I'm going to a Zumba class.
Right.
Because I'm that upscale and that high acidity that I can do that.
Right.
Whereas those who are in the Great Depression, they hold real tight to everything.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to move. They don't want to move their seat because they're scared somebody's going to take it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know what I mean? So that was the difference then. So again, what I'm getting at is these scientists and researchers have looked at these things and can truly, I guess, pinpoint the behaviors of those who were born in those earlier years, because they're adults and that's how they act. Where I think people like our daughter, who was born in 2001, she's not an adult yet. So the way that she behaves now is not the way she's going to behave 10 years from now.
Hopefully.
So, and it's clearly not, but her being 18 is not the way she behaved 10 years ago.
No, it's not.
She was a little more shy, a little more reserved. Now she's not as much.
Right.
She's willing to go out there and do her thing and, meet people. And, she's a little bit reserved at first, but she's outspoken. She speaks her mind when she can.
Mm-hmm.
So that's clearly different. So I think, again, when they were doing some of this and saying, oh, okay, well, this is how they act who were born in this year. Well, yeah, they were a little more reserved and a little more laid back. And they said, oh, that's because they're part of the computer generation. And that's why they're so quiet and reserved, because they don't have to interact with one another.
Right.
Well, she ain't like that no more.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, and I think that's why they overlap, I think, because, again, some of her friends are still quiet and reserved and stay in their computers and stay in their cell phones. And others of them are more out there and put the phone down and interact and talk to people.
So I just want to say this real quick. So as I'm listening to you, right, and you talking about how she's a little more outgoing and things like that, right? So in this article I've been reading about just millennials and them talking about evangelism, right? So let me go back for a second. So a lot of stuff when I brought up those age ranges was talking about just marketing, right? It was really coming from a marketing perspective.
Okay.
So as you're creating your flyers and this and that or whatever, it's coming from a perspective of who you're marketing to and understanding what that group is really about, which is what you're talking about right now.
Right. What are they going to focus on? What's going to catch their eye?
Right. So in that, I read an article that talked about these same age groups and with evangelism.
Okay.
And so in that, quite interesting enough, the millennials, as to why, per this article, they talk about how millennials feel like it is not fair to share one's belief, with someone of different faith in hopes that they will one day share the same faith. Which is interesting, because now you're saying, because yes, our daughter might have been shy at one time, but and now she's a little more outspoken. But is she really sharing that she's a Christian? Is she really talking to those that may not share her belief in hopes of converting one way or the other? And to be honest, as I think back now, as far as listen to her talk and listen to her friends and things like that, that's one thing I've never heard them talk about really was church stuff, to be honest. And which is quite interesting that particular age group does not really support that. Of course, other age groups are a little more, hey, I'm going to share it. The Lord has done this for me. The Lord has done that for me. But the millennials are trying their best not to be judgmental.
Right. They're more inclusive.
Right.
Again, what have they seen for being born in 2000 or whatever years it starts and ends? But they, have seen so much on television. They have seen so many various walks of life in music and in other forms of culture, So just think about, for us, our daughter, when she came up in a neighborhood that was a mixed neighborhood, majority white,
right,
but a mixed neighborhood. So her outlook is going to be different.
Right.
As well as, when you talk about us, you and I, I don't remember ever living next to a white person, really, except for maybe when I lived in Center City. I don't really remember having, Caucasians or whites or even, Indians or Asians, as a neighbor.
Right.
So I think that what you're speaking of is part of the culture.
Right.
We have been more inclusive, and so therefore her mind is a little more aware of her surroundings. So you're not going to say certain things or do certain things. It may not even consciously be, hey, I'm not trying to convert you, but I'm aware that, hey, my neighbor is Jewish, and hey, my other neighbor is Hindu, and somebody else doesn't believe in Christ or God or anything, you know. So, and not stating that, but I think that, as well as what is probably taught in school, as well of, hey, don't laugh at this person because they're different.
So that's where, again, where this article talks about that the millennials believe that disagreement means judgment.
Correct.
So as soon as you disagree with them, that means you're judging them.
And I mean, and sorry to cut you off, but that's what our daughter would say to us all the time. Whenever we would say something, she would turn to us and say, "That's mean."
Right. Right.
And we're just saying what we feel.
Right.
And she's like, "But that's mean for you to say that." And it was like, sometimes I didn't catch how it was mean.
Right.
But I respected what she was saying. Like, oh, okay, I'm sorry, but
yeah,
And
I think that's where evangelism hurts.
Mm-hmm.
Why a lot of these churches are not growing. They may grow from a perspective of, hey, these, Gen X's and some of these Gen Y's, quote unquote, are shifting from one church to another and maybe bringing their family with them, but overall, most of these churches aren't growing, and you're starting to have more and more churches being developed. Founded, but are they really going to grow as long as these millennials do not attend? And church overall, from as far back as I can remember, yes, the life of the church depended on those seniors, the silent generation, so those other generations, because of them, their funds and whatever else. I mean, but they were a little more committed to tithing and things like that.
Well, not only tithing, but the silent generation, that's what they're known for. They're known for joining things and staying in it. I'm a lifelong member at.
Right.
I'm a lifelong member of. Those things, like, that's what that silent generation is. Like, they're the ones that are like, I've been a secretary all my life. Like, they're proud to be, I went to school for nursing and I've been a nurse for, 35 years.
Right.
That's who they are. Like, they'll say what their occupation is and where they go to church, and before they even say their name. Hi, I go to such and such, and what's your name? Oh, my name is Barbara. So, or it's my name is Barbara and I'm a nurse and I attend such and such. Like,
they have more pride in what they've done.
Right. They have pride in what they've done, and then I think that's what, like you said, what holds the church, because they're joining and they're not leaving. Nothing is going to push them away. Like, I think of my church grandmother, like, no matter who was the pastor,
right.
It's like, nobody's going to move me out my church. This was my church. I was, raised here, and every time the church moved, I moved with them.
Right.
So that was her mindset.
Right.
If the music was bad, she was there. If the preaching was bad, she was there. Like, it wasn't nothing that was going to change that.
Her.
Yeah, to change that. So where I think our generation and the generations that follow are looking for something more. And I think some of that is because of what we have been handed and what the baby boomers above us have given us and who have left us. So they went to school and they were looking for education, so they made sure we were educated.
Right.
And pushed us to do that. And they moved out of the inner cities to the suburbs, and that's what, we kind of did as well. So, and we looked for, that white picket fence and the, 2.5 kids and the dog and all that kind of stuff. Like, that was what was painted for us. So I think that's the difference. And then what this Generation X and the millennials are looking for is a little bit different, I think. And we see this in the fact that a lot of those people, not our kids' age, but a little bit older, for those that we used to be on youth choir with, that may be, 5 to 10 years younger than us. The majority of them are not married. They're not having kids. They haven't bought a home. Like,
right.
Are they successful in their career? Yes. But there's nothing else within what we were told to have as goals that they're seeking.
Right. And you're correct on that. And I do see, now that you've mentioned that, and I'm thinking on most of them, you know, from every church we've been a member of, things like that, no one has really taken that, like you said, that leap of getting married. Some of them have had 2, 3, and 4 different jobs.
Okay.
So
they've
I
always
would
had a
agree.
job, you know. So
Yeah, they've worked, but was it something where, as you said, some of those other generations, they were like, yo, this is my career,
right,
and I am sticking to it through thick and thin.
right.
Now, granted, you know, especially those that were hyped to have a government job back in the day and thought the government job was the bestest ever. And then I think that's where the difference comes with, you know, that greatest silent generation to the baby boomers, even though that they pushed government jobs at that time. But the baby boomers started getting into the private sector a little bit more also. You know, I think it was in the late 60s, early 70s, somewhere around there, for more private sector type stuff where they were able to make more money. So,
But they were able to do more with that degree because, again, working for the government with the degree, you know, they're more about seniority. How long have you been here? That's what promotes you, not so much, hey, you have a degree, so you get a promotion. So I think that was more accepted and rewarded within the private sector, if you will.
So I think that's what kind of comes down to with the church. Like you're saying, you know, those other generations, they kind of, you know, hey, I'm a rock, I'm a tree. And that's also what they had to go through just in regular life.
Right.
I had to be a rock or a tree and stand my ground, right? Because otherwise, other little situations are going to. If I show I sway too much, then they'll be able to pick us apart, tear the family apart, or whatever else, right? You know, and then you have, let's say, us as Generation X, we're kind of caught in the middle. And per this article, it talks about, hey, you know, even though some of us are in church, but we're preparing ourselves to take care of our parents. You know, we're kind of in that mindset, right? You know, so we're trying to allow, though, like you said, our kids to kind of roam, be free, do what you got to do. But at the same time, they're not committing to anything, really, when it really comes down to it.
Right.
You know, so I think trying to evangelize to this particular group of young people, I see it as something that is not going to be easy. Some of the things that might have enticed us back in the day, i.e., this church over here, they have the bomb bowling parties. Yo, they get ready to go skating. Let's go skating with them. Hey, y'all, you know, everyone's going to Great Adventure or whatever it might have been. So, you know,
those things don't entice this generation. Like,
No.
you know, that's not going to sway my daughter to do anything to say we're going to Great Adventure. I mean, and she likes amusement parks, but because I think of their lack of communication, their lack of those group activities,
right,
that they don't see the value in it.
right,
You know, so once you've been to 1 or 2 amusement parks, for them, they like, all right, I've been there, done that.
right,
Check that off my list, move on to the next thing. So where for us it was, hey, we're going. Yeah, we just went last night, but we're going again. You know, like you said, your cousin can go see the same movie 4 or 5 times. But he says, well, I went with different people, or I went to a different theater and it was a different experience, which it probably is.
Yeah.
You know, because
Yeah.
you're going with different people. But that's the whole part. You're with people.
Right.
You know, I think, and we've talked about this, you know, off of the show, just you and I, but our kids today in schools, they can't talk. They don't have recess. You know, when you have gym, it's not a fun time. It's, you know, all testing. And when you have lunch, they can't talk during lunch. You sit with your group. Well, not with your group. You sit with your class.
Right.
So even if you have a friend in another class and you want to sit there and bust it up with them, nope, sit right here at this table. Table 6 is for people who are in room 306. And then your teacher will come and get you. You know, so there was no time for them to socialize. So they don't know how to.
Yeah. And I think, so in church, I think it almost mirrors that perspective. You because a lot of things is just a church service. If you look at what people are advertising right now, what they're talking about, everything is literally just a church service. There's nothing else. Like you said, it's just a socialization thing. People don't, like you said, people aren't really sitting down and talking anymore. So for me in church, that was one of the things that enticed me, to be able to sit down and, yes, we might be in church service, but guess what? We weren't leaving immediately afterwards. We might have sat down and ate this fried chicken sandwich real quick together and getting high cholesterol together. We had something in common, but, but the thing was, we socialized, we spoke. Now, granted, could we have gotten home and gotten on our landline? I'm sorry, millennials. I know y'all know what that means, with the 100-foot cord going around the whole house, but the thing is that they don't do that. They have these phones and they could text each other while they're in service.
Right.
So
there's no need to meet up after service to say, hey, how was your week, or what's going on, or what are we doing? Where are we going to go get that chicken sandwich from? Because all through service, I can send you messages and say, hey, I ordered our chicken sandwich already. All we got to do is pick it up.
Right.
And then somebody else will say, oh, we ain't even got to pick it up. I got,
Uber Eats
is going to make the delivery. So,
right. DoorDash.
So that's some of the difference, that they have so many things that's available to them, that it does make church service hard. It makes evangelizing hard. It makes ministry hard.
Right.
All of those things are difficult for that. And I think what I'm thinking of and what I'm getting is the onus is back on us. Because what kept us in church was the two generations before. So it wasn't the baby boomers. There was a few of them there, but it was more so that other generation that was like, baby, you gonna go downstairs and you gonna serve the cake. Like, what? I was getting ready to run out. Like,
right.
I was getting ready to go do such, but no, they forced us to stay there and do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, you're going to go to the store? Well, get me this, and
wait a minute. Did I say I was going to the store for you? What?
So then you run in the store for somebody else, and then you come back to the store. You didn't tell me you was going to the store. Okay.
Was I supposed to?
Right. Well, now I need you to go and get. Well, I didn't say I was going back to the store, but you didn't say those things. You just said yes and kept it going, and you were there to do all those things for them. Where, again, as you said, Maurice, it's not quite like that now, because the baby boomers aren't there, so to kind of lead the way, if you will. So if our kids are in church, then the boomers aren't there, and it's just a little bit sporadic for who they have to look up to and who they have to listen to.
Right.
And if they have to sit there and listen to 80-year-olds and 90-year-olds, it's kind of tough.
Very much so.
It's kind of tough because they don't have that connection,
right,
if you will. So, even though when we were coming up, we had older people, but they weren't that old, that many generations away from us. So they kind of understood what we were going through. They kind of understood our lingo a little bit. And some of them, were cool, we thought.
I mean, and I would say for myself, I think I try to be the same way. Just being understanding, like, I know what y'all going through. Like I say to her, like you said, I say to our daughter now, while she's in college, I understand you trying to do your thing. I know you trying to be friends, get friends, this, that, and the other, socialize. No, you ain't got to call us every night.
Right.
And have a 2-hour, 3-hour phone call with us. No, sweetie, go ahead and do what you got to do. Right.
Right.
So like you said, so with that, I also understand in the church perspective. No, y'all go ahead, young people, y'all go over there and sit down and talk. Now, I don't necessarily agree with children's church per se, but I do think that there has to be a time where the kids can kind of gather together.
Right.
So that's one of the things that I really do believe, that kind of, when we think about evangelism for churches, this is one of the things they have to really take a look at are the age groups and understand, that, this millennial group, they're not talking to their friends about, beliefs and stuff.
Right.
And that, they do believe that disagreement means judgment. And they don't want judgment from us as adults. And they don't want judgment from their peers, especially when it comes down to, because as soon as you think that you're judging somebody and you keep pressuring them, does it become bullying? Because that bullying thing, I think is a really touchy subject.
Right.
Because,
and again, that's what they're taught in school.
Right.
That, not to do that. So
right.
From being a youngster, like, we talk to our kids and say, well, hey, are there fights or there's this going on in school? And it's really not a whole lot, not like it was when we were coming up. It may be a few, but
right.
that's more stuff that's spilling out from them being at home and then spilling it into school. But it's not like some beef that happened at school,
right? Type
thing. So it's just totally different. So as you said, for those church leaders out there, you have a lot to think about. You can't just reach out to the community the way that you used to, because
right.
this community and these youngsters have truly changed
very much so,
and are not the same folks that you're used to bringing in your doors, and they may not want to join and be a part of it and all that kind of stuff, and what they're looking for, how you reach out to them. It may not be a flyer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, last year with my daughter in high school, Reese, you was always looking for a flyer. Like, you was always like, where the information written at?
Right.
Right. It's not on the website. It ain't, if they don't have a flyer and it's not on the website, then how do we know it's true?
Right.
And I was like, well, she said, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Like, nothing about the prom, nothing about, different activities, class trip, like everything was just kind of word of mouth.
Right.
Maybe it's something on social media, but you had to be a part of that group to get the information.
You're right about that. Yeah.
So it's like, as a parent, we were lost. Because we're used to like, hey, you gonna phone call us. The church used to give phone calls. Class leaders,
yep.
Or section leaders for the choir,
right,
would tell you, yes, this is the songs we're singing, this is what we're having rehearsal, this is what we're wearing, so you kind of knew what was going on. Again, that communication,
right.
But now, that was a hot mess. Like, there was just nothing really out there to really tell you what was going on. When the principal would call and say, hey, this is what's going on. But outside of that, there was nothing really written to kind of say, hey, mark your calendars.
Right.
This is what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing, too, that, so as you're talking about, it's funny how the church and the school kind of is like hand in hand. Because even in churches, again, like I said, you don't hear about all the other stuff that's going on. You hear about church services, but you don't hear too much about Bible study per se anymore.
Right.
You don't hear about love feasts like that anymore.
You don't even hear about the social things, a chicken fry. You don't hear about them going to see Sight and Sound.
Yeah.
You don't see those flyers out there like that.
What you do see, though, you see it for those senior centers, though.
Right.
I do. I will see that. I will say that.
Because that's how they market to the generations that they know want to have that. They have to have something in their hand.
Right. And you know what? The thing is that I don't necessarily have to have it in my hand, even if it's via email or social media or something like that. Listen, I have, over the last couple of days, I've been doing my social media look or whatever. I have like 20 some odd accounts.
Okay.
You get what I mean? So it's not like I can't find you. You get what I'm saying? I'm on almost every platform there is.
Okay.
So I don't care if you put on Snapchat. I don't care if you put on Instagram, Periscope. I don't care what it is. Just something to say, hey, this is what's going on at the school. Hey, this is what's going on at the church. Let someone know what's happening. And then, I think what happens is that people get upset and like, yo, you didn't come to the last one, so I'm not going to invite you again.
Right.
Well, hold on. Wait a second. You don't know actually what's going on. And without really talking to me and getting a better idea to say, hey, Reese, I invited you. What's going on? Hey, everyone does have a life. And I think that's the other part, too, is that, at least for our generation, as far as evangelism, and I keep hearing a lot of people say this, unfortunately, all my friends are just like me. Everybody that I talk to is just like me. So that means everyone that I talk to is a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
So who am I? How am I? And I understand birds of a feather flock together, but there has to be one person out there that you can find. Everybody's not going to be exactly like you.
Right.
Or is that the only way that you live? You like, I only could be around Christians 100% of the time. Well, how do you grow? How do you create diversity if everyone is exactly like you?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's one of the things that we really need to think about as Christians, as Buddhists, as Muslims. I don't care what you are, just as you are evangelizing and talking to people that's of different faiths than yourself. Do you surround yourself around people that's not like you? And when it comes to millennials, you have to be able to get to a point where you actually understand that, hey, just because someone disagrees is not a judgment.
Mm-hmm.
You can agree to disagree. And
Right.
I think that's a phrase that people don't really understand half the time.
Right.
You can agree to disagree. So is there anything else you want to talk about this?
No, I think we covered a whole lot. We would
Oh,
love
yeah,
to
yeah,
hear
yeah,
back
yeah.
from you and let us know what your thoughts are about these different generations and how,
Right.
maybe even how you're reaching out to millennials or reaching out to these new generations
Right.
and what's working in your church. Like, how are you getting the information out there? How are you bringing in new members of that younger generation? So certainly comment, send us your message, let us know what's working out there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's the real deal?
If you're one of those churches that is still growing, as Kafa saying, let us know. And let the community know. Now, granted, I know some people are like, I ain't telling my secrets, but you have a lot of churches out here that only has like 10, 15 members that are really struggling, so, and I think also people's egos don't come into play when they're like, listen, I'm not going to merge with this church or do a joint with that or whatever else. I think some of those type of things kind of get in the way too.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a whole nother topic, a whole nother
Sure
show,
is.
so, but y'all, we love y'all.
They sure do.
And we will hopefully, we hope that you will tune in to the next episode. All right.
Alrighty.
This is Reese,
And this is Conklin.
and we hope that y'all have a good day.
God bless you.
That will keep you in perfect peace.